Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. What is it like to live in a war-torn country? So to answer this question, we came to Jerusalem today to understand what life is like in the city during these very difficult days. We will walk through the new city and we will also see the old city and the biblical part. So if you are ready, let's get started. We came to Jerusalem today to understand what life is like in the city during these times. We started the day in a busy place. This is the entrance to the city. Behind us, we see the Yitzhak Navin train station. From here, the train goes to the airport, to Tel Aviv, and several other places. And on this side, we see the bus station. From here, you can take buses to practically any city in all of Israel. And also now is an important time for us to remember that all of Israel is not just one city. Israel is not just Jerusalem. And the reality during the war varies greatly from city to city, from region to region. For example, people living in the south of Israel, in cities near Gaza, and also people living on the border with Lebanon have been evacuated from their homes for over a year. That's tens of thousands of people, including a good portion of them are refugees here in Jerusalem. But our focus today is to show you firsthand the reality of Jerusalem. And I think what strikes us most, first of all, when we arrive here in the city on all sides, we see a great solidarity with the kidnapped and their families. Look what's behind us, this hourglass that's written, "The kidnapped are still there," which means the kidnapped are still there. When we talk about our reality here in Jerusalem for over a year, we have to remember that their reality is 1,000 times worse than any person who is free in Israel. They have been for over a year without seeing the sunlight, without having a normal meal, without being with their families, and without knowing when will be their last minute of life. They have been on death row for a year. They really are in an extremely difficult situation, and that's why Jerusalem and the whole country have a great solidarity with them, their families, and all the time the population of Israel and also many populations around the world demand their immediate release. And here we also want to take this moment and ask for the immediate release of all the kidnapped, the 101 who are still kidnapped in the hands of terrorists in Gaza. And since we are next to the bus station, we also see many soldiers who have been given leave from the army and are going to or coming back from their homes. And to continue today's journey, we are now going to get on the VLT, the light vehicle on rails here in the city, so we can explore and learn a little more about what is really happening. Let's go! You can see that it is really busy. We got off at the stop called Mahane Yehuda, which is the main food market of the city. Because one of the questions I saw coming up a lot in the comments this past year is asking about the city's supply situation, if there's food, if there's everything we need, and that's why we came here to see with our own eyes. Before that, I just want to show you what I'm seeing here. The Israelis have always had a very big national pride in the country's flag. But since all this that's been happening this past year, I think that's increased even more, and that's why also wherever we go here in Jerusalem, we see many Israeli flags everywhere. So we're passing by this stand that's selling flowers, and right along with these flowers, we're seeing the flags. But let's now head to the market, folks. Most of the fruits and vegetables here are produced in Israel itself. And look how interesting, despite over 60% of the country being desert, Israel managed to make the desert bloom and bear fruit. This reminds me a lot of a prophecy that is in the book of Isaiah. The desert and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the wilderness shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. So the fruits and vegetables we see here are part of this change in the desert. However, a large part of Israel's agriculture is precisely in the area near Gaza and Lebanon. And the terrorists over the past year have burned thousands and thousands of agricultural hectares. They were not able to deplete the country's supplies, as you can see here. But yes, food prices have risen significantly in the past year. But not everything that is sold here in the market and in Israel is locally produced. There are things, for example, like rice, which is a crop that requires a lot of water, so it is imported from abroad. So we also see food imported from abroad here, which is good to see because we see international trade continuing to function with Israel. Thank God, since the beginning of the war, we have never experienced a shortage in the city. But now it's time to get back on the light rail transit and continue our journey. In the background, you can see the walls that divide New Jerusalem, where we are, from the historical and biblical part that we usually call the Old City. And here we are passing right in front of the new gate, which is the main entrance to the Christian quarter, which we will get to know later today. We are now in East Jerusalem, which is the side of the city that has majority Arab and Muslim neighborhoods. And it's also important for us to look a little at how life is on this side of the city to really understand what life in Jerusalem is like for all its populations. So let's walk around here a little bit and see this better.
Let's go!
Take into account that we are not in a market, in a big fair, but we can see here some trades, and they already help us understand that here too, there is no shortage. There is no shortage also on the eastern side of the city. And for example, this little market, we can see that it is stocked up to practically the ceiling with everything that would normally be there. Perhaps some people might be surprised to see an Arab-Muslim neighborhood here in Jerusalem. And not only that, we are now next to the Damascus Gate that gives access to the Arab-Muslim neighborhood within the Old City. And even more than that, almost 20% of the population of Israel are of Arab origin, most of them Muslims. And if I may add one more thing, most of these Arabs identify themselves as Israelis, They are Arabs, Muslims, and Israelis, and some of them even serve in the Israeli army, fighting side by side with the other soldiers and protecting Israel and all its populations. And for some people who don't live here in the Middle East, this may seem like a strange thing, but this is our reality, and the reality of Israel, the Middle East, and all its conflict is much more complex than the media sometimes makes it seem. We can see that this path is very busy. Why is that? Because right now a special prayer is about to start at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. It's a Muslim prayer, and that's why we're seeing the local Arab Muslim population from Jerusalem and also from other places in Israel going there to pray. This happens all the time, every year. But what we can see different from a normal time, from a time when there is no war, is that at this moment we do not see tourists. Jerusalem is a city that receives millions of tourists every year, and unfortunately we can see that they are not here now. Despite the country's borders being open, the airport being open, a good part of the European airlines have canceled their flights, and many people are afraid to come to Israel during these months, and that's why there are far fewer tourists than usual, and that's why we see more than usual even the local population. I want you now to look at the city's population, both the Jews, Christians, Muslims who are passing by here. Look at their faces. Can you see that there is not a constant tension and fear? Despite Israel indeed being at war, life in Jerusalem in a certain way continues. Obviously, there are things that are different, but the schools are open, the health centers, the hospitals, the nurseries. People continue working, so yes, there is a normality despite the war, which may seem like a paradox, and it is. We also have a strange feeling of maintaining normal life in Jerusalem, or relatively normal, knowing that yes, there is a conflict happening. It's hard to explain, but also maintaining normal life, closer to normal, is a form of peaceful resistance. It's about showing those who want to destroy our lives, the lives of everyone who is here in this country, that we continue living. It's a resistance. And one thing that usually happens in Jerusalem, that keeps happening, I wanted to show you, I don't know if I've shown this here on the channel, but you can see that there is a store here that is, in quotes, closed. What happens? The owner of this store, he is probably Muslim, and he is now also going to the mosque to pray, and that's why he needs to close the store. And what did he simply do? He put here 2 blankets, some cloths, a stick to close the entrance of the store. And in this way, he says, look, I'm not here to sell, but the cash register is here inside. All the goods are here inside. And this also shows that the daily security of Jerusalem, the civil security, it continues to happen. And so the store is closed, but not really closed. We can see that, yes, next to us now, there is a group of tourists passing by, and it is not by chance that they are precisely on this street. We can see her name here. We are now on Via Dolorosa, one of the most important paths for Christians all over the world. It is precisely located here in the Muslim neighborhood. Via Dolorosa is the path that Jesus took from the place of his trial to the place of his crucifixion and tomb. And precisely this path starts a few meters behind us, where the Antonia fortress was located. The path splits into, yes, it does. because there are two possible locations here in Jerusalem for the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. One of these places is called the Garden Tomb, and it is in this direction. So part of the people, when they come here, take the Via Dolorosa and turn right and go to the Garden Tomb. The other location is right here to our left, which is the path we are going to take together now, passing through the stations of the Via Dolorosa towards the Holy Sepulchre. So let's continue here walking through the Muslim neighborhood through the stations of the Via Dolorosa. Here we see the third and fourth stations. The third marks the first of Jesus' falls, and the fourth station marks the meeting of Jesus with his mother Mary. The path is divided into 14 stations, and we are going to visit some of them together now. You can see the circle with the number 5 marked on the wall. This is the 5th station, and according to tradition, this is where Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. Some of the shops on this street are closed because this street mainly has many shops that cater to pilgrims and tourists. Souvenir shops, travel memento stores. And since there is much less tourism at this moment, there are far fewer pilgrims. Some of these shops are not opening or are opening with reduced hours. Especially on Fridays and Sundays, because Friday is the sacred day for Muslims. So some of them do not open their shops, and also Christians do not open on Sunday, as it is the day of rest for a good part of the local Christian community. So for you to know that if you want to shop in Jerusalem on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays also, Saturday, because of the Jews, are days that part of the trade does close. For many who walk down this street, this building may even go unnoticed, but here we are at the 6th station of the Via Dolorosa, the station that recalls Veronica, who tradition says was a woman who took off the scarf that covered her hair and wiped Jesus' face of sweat, blood, and tears, and really shows her compassion, a compassion that we really need to this day. We are now entering the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. As we said, we want to show a little of the different current realities of the city, and we are also heading towards the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which you can already see there in the background with those 2 gray domes. So let's together learn a little more about the Christian part of the city. Here we see the 9th station of the Via Dolorosa, which marks the last of Jesus' falls. And honestly, for me, being here now is a bit strange because I am used to passing through this place and having here a large flow of pilgrims and tourists walking and following the steps of Jesus. In fact, this route of the stations is a route that people take carrying crosses. Not life-size crosses like Jesus's, but very large crosses, even taller than me. So it's really, really different to see this place so empty. I think since the time of COVID, we haven't seen the old Christian city in this way. We are really almost alone here. Some people working at the Coptic Church of Restoration. But what I want to do with you now is to enter this small church, or at least it looks small from the outside. It is an Ethiopian church, which is something that sometimes in Brazil we end up not knowing, but Ethiopia was one of the first countries to convert to Christianity, and the Ethiopian church has headquarters here and monks here since really the earliest period of Christianity in the Holy Land. And now we are going to follow the path of the Via Dolorosa that passes through this Ethiopian church. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been under restoration for many, many years. Each time they restore a different small part, but we are seeing now that there is less tourism and fewer pilgrims, that they have intensified the restorations. And so we can see that it seems like there is a construction site around us, but in reality, nothing new is being built, but what was already inside the church is being restored. And also because it is a place that usually has a lot of movement, one of the most visited places in Israel and all of the Holy Land. So let's go in now, and that's why you'll understand why this place is different at this moment. Because due to the war, there are more restorations. We do see that the place is not completely empty, but much less than usual. Exactly. If we come at a normal time here at the Holy Sepulchre, we can easily spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, and even 3 hours in line to enter the sepulchre, which at this moment we can go directly. Maybe just this half dozen people in front of us. So exactly the people who are coming to visit Israel during this period have a point that can be advantageous to visit the places practically without any queue. But before we go in, I want to remind you, I've said this before, but it's very important to highlight that there are 2 places in Jerusalem where possibly is the location of Calvary and Jesus' tomb. One of them we are seeing here now, which is the Holy Sepulchre, and the other one is called the Garden Tomb. And we already have videos here on the channel showing the Garden Tomb, so whoever wants to just search here on the channel about the Garden Tomb, and you will also find videos. But today we are really going to enter the Holy Sepulchre together. Currently you can see a large church here. The tomb itself has also been greatly modified over the centuries. But if we were to enter this same place 2,000 years ago, we would see a simple cave carved into the rock. A small part of the original stone is protected and preserved here inside. And this small room was the tomb itself, and here to our right is the place where it is believed that the body of Jesus was laid. When we say that we are in the Christian neighborhood, this is the neighborhood for all Christians, and that's why there are different churches, denominations, and groups here. For example, this church that is right behind me is a Lutheran evangelical church. So we really saw an Ethiopian church. We saw the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is divided among 6 Christian denominations. We are seeing here a Lutheran evangelical church, and there are many, many others here in the neighborhood. So really everyone can have a little piece of Jerusalem for themselves. Our last stop for today will be at a very special place. Look where we've arrived. Here is the Wailing Wall. But did you know that this name is completely wrong? The name of this place is not and has never been the Wailing Wall. The correct name for it is Kotel Amaravi, which means the Western Wall, because it was the outer western wall of the Jerusalem temple complex. The name Wailing Wall was used only by foreigners. For any Israeli, for anyone who speaks Hebrew or even English, they will say it is the Western Wall. However, unfortunately, the reality that we have been living in this last year has also turned this place into a place of lamentations. And when we get here during all these months, we do see people crying and lamenting at the wall. Firstly, for all the lives that were lost in this conflict. Obviously, we cannot forget the nearly 1,200 people who were brutally massacred on October 7th, and also all the other innocent victims who died in this conflict after October 7th, mainly women and children. We also see people here praying for the kidnapped, whom we have already talked about at the beginning, about all their suffering, and also a very personal issue. A good part of the Israeli population, and also my family, is that we have loved ones who are in the army defending the country. In my case, my husband, who is defending the country, but when we walk here, we see people praying, worried about their husbands, their children, their parents, for everyone who is now being forced to defend the country, because really Israel has no option now but to defend itself. Because if Israel doesn't defend itself tomorrow, we wouldn't have a state anymore. And that's why the place that is usually for celebrations. And you come here at a normal time? We see bar mitzvahs, parties, joys. It's very common also is that one proposes in marriage. So we often see couples here committing. It's a place where families come to celebrate, that people come to sing on Fridays to welcome the Sabbath, to welcome the Saturday. So the place that usually exudes prayer, faith, and joy has also become a place of lamentations. And really, I think that's the feeling of the whole country, that we are living in difficult days, but mainly that we need to pray for peace to be restored in Israel, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and throughout the Middle East. And that's why now I want to invite you to come closer with me to the Wailing Wall, and on the way, we will together make a prayer for peace. Let's go. Jerusalem, which is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go up. The tribes of the Lord, as is fitting for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. There are the thrones of justice, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love her be prosperous. May peace reign within you and prosperity in your palaces. For the sake of my brothers and friends, I ask, may there be peace in you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. And of course, when we think of this psalm, we will think of the peace of Jerusalem, the peace of all Israel, the peace of the entire Middle East and of the whole world that really needs it. And I also want to read a biblical prophecy about the end times and peace. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, Balami, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion will go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples and will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. But everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree. and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. This passage from Micah begins here in Jerusalem, more specifically on the Temple Mount, which is what is on the other side of the Wailing Wall. And the prophecy speaks of a beautiful vision of a world at peace, where weapons will be transformed into tools of work, and where there is no longer a need for war. It's the desire for a future where nations live in harmony and seek peace. And we truly pray for that day to come soon.
Wow.
I am very happy to see that this place is not just for lamentations. These days, the spirit of the people of Israel remains joyful and alive. And here we just saw this group of girls arrive singing traditional songs, biblical music, and they must also now be going through many lamentations, praying, probably also praying for peace. But I hope you enjoyed it, found today's video interesting. See you next week. See you next week, folks. A kiss.